name's James. I run a mental health charity called breakingFree, and as you guys probably just heard, today I'm here to talk about how to look after your mental health. And we're just going to be having a bit of a discussion over the next probably about 50 minutes to 60 minutes, teaching you guys tips and tricks on how to look after your mental health. And I promise it will be interesting. So if you're a bit unsure, please stick with me for at least 10 to 15 minutes as we get into it. Now, as some of you are at home right now, looking at your computer screen, you're looking at me and you're thinking, what on earth is someone so young doing on a Wednesday, talking about such a serious topic? Like, why don't we have a middle-aged boarding psychologist? Like, why do we have this young guy? If you guys are looking at me right now and you're thinking those things, the truth is you're actually right. I actually shouldn't be the person giving this presentation here today. It should actually be my dad. I had this vision that after my dad had recovered from severe depression and anxiety, that he could be like a source of inspiration and guidance for millions of people around the world. My dad was like an absolutely incredible person. He was always the life of every party. He was a massive family man. He played for Queensland in 3 different sports. He was just an incredibly talented, amazing person. And unfortunately, however, throughout my dad's life, he experienced very severe depression and anxiety. And after going in and out of mental health hospitals, after trying treatment option after treatment option, after giving his absolute best, unfortunately, about 2 weeks after I graduated from high school, my dad made the decision to end his own life. And you know what the really sad thing is, and this is why I started Breaking Free, and I present at schools and businesses throughout Australia, is my dad is just one of millions of people around the world who experience mental illness every single year. And guys, I know there'll be people watching this presentation right now who've experienced a mental illness either personally or through a friend or through a loved one. And that's what I think is really sad. Like, after seeing what my dad went through and what our family's gone through, to think there's other people out there going through a similar thing, I think is incredibly tragic and incredibly sad. And I've got a graph I kind of want to show you that illustrates this tragedy I'm talking about. What this graph shows is the lifetime prevalence or chance of experiencing depression. Now, each of these different colored lines, they represent a different generation. So if you look at the green line, that green line represents our grandparents' generation. And what it shows is that by the time that our grandparents' generation reaches about 75 years old, 10%, so 1 in 10 people from that generation had experienced depression once throughout their entire life, which, when you think about it, 1 in 10 people experiencing depression over the course of an entire lifespan, it isn't too bad. But you know what's really scary? See that red line on the graph? That's our generation. And what it shows is that in our generation, by the time we reach around 25 years old, 25%, so 1 in 4 people from our generation, have already experienced this awful, debilitating illness at some point in their life. And you know what's really scary? If things don't change, so if this trend was to continue the way it is, if we were to take that red line and we were to extrapolate it and continue it upwards, it is predicted that by the time that our current generation reaches middle age, 50%, so 1 in 2 people from our generation, would have already experienced this awful, debilitating illness at some point in their life, which I just think is incredibly tragic and incredibly sad. Did you guys know? Not a lot of people know this, but according to the World Health Organization, in terms of disability-adjusted life years, mental illness is currently deemed the 2nd leading cause of disability worldwide. And like you often hear about heart disease, cancer, etc., but mental illness is currently deemed the 2nd leading cause of disability worldwide. And it's predicted, once again, if things don't change, that by 2030, in terms of disability-adjusted life years, it'll be the most common and disabling illness in the entire world in both developed and developing nations. Now, I looked at this graph, right, and I looked at all the statistics after my dad passed away. And by the way, I'm not going to bore you guys with statistics today, but I looked at this graph and I looked at the statistics and I went, you know what? Like, this makes absolutely no sense. Like, it makes absolutely no sense. Whereas with other illnesses, as we're becoming more medically and technologically advanced, they're decreasing in prevalence. For some reason, rates of mental illness are increasing. And antidepressant medication use, it's increased by over 30% over the last 10 years. We've got more psychologists and psychiatrists available than we've ever had before. There's more mental health charities than there's ever been before. There's more treatment options. The stigma attached to mental illness is actually the lowest it's ever been. And yet, for some reason, rates of mental illness are increasing with each successive generation. And I looked at this and I went like, well, this makes no sense. So other illnesses, as we're becoming more medically and technologically advanced, are decreasing in prevalence. And yet for some reason, rates of mental illness are increasing. And I looked at this and I went, like, what's going on? Like, how can this possibly be occurring? And the reason this is occurring, it's actually incredibly simple. Basically, the lifestyles we are leading, they go against and they're not in tune with how we've biologically evolved and adapted to live. So what I mean by that is the lifestyles the majority of us are currently living, it's on how our brains and our bodies have biologically evolved and adapted to be living. So you're probably wondering, like, okay, James, well, how have we evolved and adapted to be living? Well, did you guys know that 99.99% of human existence on Earth was actually spent as hunter-gatherers? So that basically meant that the guys would go out and hunt for animals, and the women go collect berries and fruits, etc. And that's how we lived for 99.99% of our existence on Earth. It's actually only in the last about 50 to 100 years that our lifestyles as human beings have drastically changed. So you're probably wondering, okay, James, we're biologically evolved to this hunter-gatherer lifestyle, but what did the hunter-gatherer lifestyle involve? Like, how do we live? So basically, we're all hunter-gatherers. We're in these small tribes of about 200 to 300 people. As a result, we're constantly surrounded by friends and loved ones. We used to always do things together as a group, and the tribe either succeeded or failed together as a collective. We used to exercise, it was estimated, about 6 to 7 hours every single day. So either hunting for animals, collecting berries or fruits, moving from place to place. As a result, it's estimated we used to get about 7 hours of sunlight every single day. We used to go to sleep when the sun would go down and would wake when the sun would come up. And on average, it's estimated that hunter-gatherers used to get about 10 hours of sleep every single night. Our diets were in balance, in particular, our non-essential fatty acids, our omega-3 and our omega-6 were in balance. And above all, stresses were dealt with as a collective. So either the tribe succeeded or failed, but it wasn't this internal competitive environment. Now, having listened to that lifestyle that we lived for tens of thousands of years, just thinking to yourself right now, do you think that lifestyle is a little bit different to the lifestyle the majority of us are currently living? And the answer is yes. The lifestyle is completely different to how the majority of people are currently living. And it's having catastrophic results when it comes to mental illness. So we can keep churning out more and more antidepressant medication. We can keep having more psychologists, more psychiatrists, more mental health charities, more mental health speakers. But until we as a society start to address our lifestyles and start to live mentally healthy lifestyles, rates of mental illness are just going to continue to increase. Now, maybe in 4,000 or 5,000 years' time, we as humans would have biologically evolved and adapted to getting 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night, of barely ever exercising, of always being indoors, of having out of balance diets, of being relatively socially isolated, of always being stressed. Maybe in 4 or 5,000 years' time, we as humans would have biologically evolved and adapted to that lifestyle. But as you would have probably learned about in biology at school, it takes animals, and we're an animal, thousands and thousands of years to adapt to something. And the brutal truth is we haven't yet biologically evolved and adapted to the lifestyles the majority of us are currently living. We're still biologically evolved and adapted to this hunter-gatherer lifestyle that we've been living for tens of thousands of years. Now, I've got a bit of evidence I want to talk about to kind of support what I'm saying. And it's absolutely fascinating. It's about these two guys here on the screen. Now, these two guys here on the screen, they're members of the Kululi tribe. And the Kululi tribe, it's one of the last remaining hunter-gatherer tribes in the entire world. And they live in the highlands of Papua New Guinea. Now, researchers went in about 15, 16 years ago, and they conducted intense psychological tests on every single member of the 2,000-person Kululi tribe. Now, just so you guys are aware, the Kululi tribe live an absolutely brutal existence. Like, we're talking average lifespan is about 50 years old. Infant mortality rates are 50%. So 50% of babies die at birth. There's literally stories of guys getting speared by boars and dying from that. Like, it's an absolutely brutal, harsh lifestyle, but they live a pure hunter-gatherer existence. And they're one of the only tribes in the world that still do. Now, researchers went in and they conducted these intense psychological tests on the 2,000 members of the Kululi tribe. Now, have a guess, just like through the screen, like even say it out loud. Have a guess how many you think out of 2,000 people were found to be experiencing some kind of mental illness. If you thought 0, you were correct. Out of 2,000 people, not one person was found to be experiencing mental illness. Now, sales do the same thing. Like sales to go into the Australian populace right now. And by the way, I reckon we probably live in one of the nicest countries in the world. If I also grab 2,000 people from the Australian populace right now, once again, a bit of a guessing game through the screen, have a guess out of 2,000 people currently in Australia, how many would be found to be experiencing some kind of mental illness? If you thought in your head or you said out loud 400 to 450, you're correct. Currently in Australia, about 20 to 21% of people would be found to be experiencing some kind of mental illness. Now, I know I'm hammering this home, but it's this mismatch between the lifestyles the majority of us are currently living and this hunter-gatherer lifestyle that our brains and our bodies are still biologically evolved and adapted to be living that's resulting in this epidemic of mental illness. Now, just listening to this first 10 or so minutes, you've probably already started to get a bit of an idea of the solution. And the solution is actually incredibly simple and it's incredibly effective. We just need to make small lifestyle changes that bring our lifestyles closer to this hunter-gatherer lifestyle that our brains and our bodies are still biologically evolved and adapted to be living. Now, by the way, if you're listening through the screen, I'm not going to ask you all to like strip off where you are, grab a bag and start foresting for berries. Like we're not going to be going that far back. We're just going to be making really small lifestyle changes and changes to our daily habits that bring our lifestyles closer to this hunter-gatherer lifestyle we're biologically evolved and adapted to be living. Now, I don't want you guys to get bored watching at home. So what we'll do is we'll do a couple, we might have a little mini break, we'll do a couple more. And over the next about 30 minutes, I'm going to methodically work our way through 8 things that you can do in your everyday life to scientifically and statistically reduce your chances of experiencing mental illness and to improve your overall mental health and well-being. And by the way, what I'm about to teach and talk about, it's applicable for every type of person. So whether you're listening right now and you're currently experiencing mental illness or you don't have a mental illness, this advice is applicable for everyone. So without further ado, let's get into the first daily lifestyle habit. And the first lifestyle habit is to give yourself stress breaks throughout the day. Now, I don't know if you've heard of the fight or flight response before, but the fight or flight response, it was this biological response that developed when we were hunter-gatherers. So like say for some weird reason, like an elephant was to come through the store right now, which would be quite impressive, but it was to come through the store right now and just charge at me. What the fight or flight response does is it prepares our bodies to either fight the animal or to run away from it. And it pumps all these chemicals and hormones throughout our bodies to assist us in doing that. One of the ones you've probably heard of is called adrenaline. And it prepares our bodies to either fight the animal or to run away. Now, I reckon most people watching right now, you've probably experienced the fight or flight response before. I mean, if you've ever been in a fight, that's a good example of the fight or flight response being triggered. Like you become a lot more alert, your reflexes increase, your strength actually increases by about 20%. Another one is you know when you're trying to get to sleep at night? You hear a little sound, and you're like, oh, robber. And all of a sudden, like you tense up, you freak out, your heart rate increases, you can hear every single sound in the room. That's the fight or flight response being triggered. Now, the key thing with the fight or flight response is it evolved to be triggered in short doses of about 30 seconds to a minute. Because when we're hunter-gatherers, that's how long it would take us to either fight that saber-toothed tiger or to run away from it. So in the short term, when the fight or flight response is triggered for a short period of time, our brains and our bodies, we can flush out the chemicals and hormones that are triggered during the response, and we're fine. But in the long run, when the fight or flight response is triggered for a prolonged period of time, which basically means that you're under a prolonged period of stress, our brains and our bodies, we can't actually flush out those chemicals and hormones. And what it does is it begins to change the neurochemistry in our brains. And by the way, that's what mental illness is. Mental illness is a neurochemical imbalance in our brains. That's actually what happened with my dad. He was struggling to keep our business afloat, so he didn't go bankrupt for about 8 years. And he was working like literally 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, to the extent that I remember at one point, he bought a bed to go in his office so he could wake up and keep working. And it was that prolonged period of stress that ultimately led to him getting very severe depression and anxiety. And study after study over the last 20 or so years has basically conclusively proven that stress is prolonged periods of stress is one of the predominant causes of mental illness. So what I would suggest, and the first daily habit that I'll be talking about today, is to give yourself stress breaks throughout the day. So long periods of stress are bad. That's what we want to avoid. Short periods of stress, it's a normal everyday part of life. We're all going to experience it. It's completely normal. So say, for example, you're stressed a couple hours before a big exam. That's okay. Say, for example, you're stressed before you're about to go on a date, a first date. That's fine. But if you're listening to me right now and you're stressed for an entire week, month, year, that's when it becomes incredibly dangerous and toxic to your mental health. So what you want to do, and what I would suggest, is whenever you notice yourself feeling stressed for about 1 to 2 hours, straight away stop whatever it is you're doing and go and do something that you know works for you personally to lower and reduce your stress levels. So for me personally, it's sport. When I get stressed, I'll go play some kind of sport. For some of you listening right now, it might be music. For some of you, it might be walking your dog. For some of you, it might be playing FIFA. It doesn't really matter what it is, as long as you know that it works personally for you to lower and reduce your stress levels. So everyone's different. Everyone's got different things that works for them. Say, for example, you've got a friend and they're like, oh, like when I get stressed, I love to go for a run. And you hate running. Don't go for a run. It's not going to work. You've got to do what you know works personally for you. And so what I would suggest is whenever you notice yourself feeling stressed for about 1 to 2 hours, straight away go and do some kind of activity to break up your stress levels, even if it's only for 5 or 10 minutes. And what you're doing in essence, I'll explain it with my hands. What you're doing is you're very aware and cognizant of your stress levels. And when you notice yourself getting stressed for a while, you do a stress relieving activity. And that gives the body opportunity to flush out the stress chemicals that are triggered, such as cortisol. It gives your body an opportunity to flush those out. Then you get stressed again, you do a stress relieving activity. And this is so much better for your mental health than being constantly stressed. I personally, like throughout the day, I might take maybe 7 or 8 times. I'll give myself a 5 to 10 minute stress break to just lower my stress levels. I'll notice, okay, I'm starting to get a bit stressed. I'll go for a quick walk outside. I'll go watch a YouTube video. I'll go play basketball outside. I'll just do something to help lower and reduce my stress levels. It's a very simple technique, but it's underutilized. People are unaware of the importance of it. And the last thing I'll say when it comes to this, and it's a bit of a comment on how society is currently functioning, but often people, and you might be able to relate to this, often people kind of wear the fact that they're incredibly stressed as a badge of honor. And they go, when we ask someone, oh, how are you? Normally the response is, oh, I'm so busy. I'm so stressed. And it's nearly like people are proud of how stressed they are because it means that they're working really hard. They're a very important person. They've got a lot on their plate. But long periods of stress, prolonged stress, is one of the worst possible things for your mental health. So just be aware of your stress levels and make sure you're giving yourself stress breaks throughout the day, even when you're studying. When you're studying, study for 20 minutes, give yourself a 10-minute stress break. Study for 20 minutes, give yourself a stress break. But just intersperse your day with these little stress breaks. It's incredibly beneficial for your mental health. All right, moving on to the second daily lifestyle habit that I would recommend. Number 2 is to exercise aerobically for at least 15 minutes each day. Now, we obviously all know that exercise is good for our bodies. I would actually contend that exercise is even more important and beneficial for our mental health. And studies over the last 15 to 20 years have proven this. I'll tell you one of the most interesting ones, right? They compared one of the most effective known antidepressant medications, and they compared it to a bout of exercise of 30 minutes of fast walking 3 times a week. Now, in the short run, the exercise and the medication, they came out about equal in effectiveness. But in the long run, the exercise came out as being more beneficial. And the reason for this is exercise releases this thing, you've probably heard of it before, called dopamine and serotonin, which is kind of like the body and the brain's feel-good, happy chemicals. That's why generally, after you finish exercising, you'll feel an increase in your energy and mood. It's because it's released these feel-good, happy chemicals into the brain. Now, if you look at the screen right now, what's recommended is to get 15 minutes of aerobic exercise each day. This is important. The type of exercise that's been found to have the biggest antidepressant effect is aerobic exercise. And for those of you that are listening and you're asking yourself, like, well, what is aerobic exercise? Aerobic exercise is any type of exercise that gets your heart rate up to a level where it's kind of difficult to hold a conversation. So you're like, like, that was a bit weird, but like, when it's difficult to hold a conversation. I'm not going to give you guys a heart rate zone that you have to be in. That's a bit too complicated and difficult, and everyone's heart rates vary. But if it's difficult to hold a conversation, that's what's deemed to be aerobic exercise. Now, 15 minutes of aerobic exercise, it isn't too difficult. Like, there's no real reason why you can't get 15 minutes of aerobic exercise each day. My advice, pick up something that you enjoy doing to get your heart rate for 15 minutes, and then try to pick a time of the day that you're going to do it consistently. So whether that's in the morning, before work, in the afternoon. Personally, I always do it in the afternoon, but pick a time of the day that you're going to do it. Maybe list down 1 or 2, maybe 3 activities that you enjoy doing that get your heart rate up for 15 minutes. And then starting this afternoon, post-presentation, make sure that you begin to do that exercise. I'll tell you something quite interesting. So I've been running a mental health charity called Breaking Free for about 7 years now. And in that time, I presented to and worked with tens of thousands of young people when it comes to their mental health. And one of the first things that I get someone who's experiencing mental illness to do is to simply get into the habit of aerobically exercising for 15 minutes each day. What we'll often do is I'll sit down with them. We'll work out a couple of activities that they enjoy doing. We'll work out a time and a place that they're going to do it. And then sometimes I'll start doing it with them, and we'll get them into the habit of exercising for 15 minutes each day because it's so beneficial for your mental health. Now, for the people listening who are going, oh, like, James, like, it hurts. Like, exercise, it hurts. I don't want to do it. Don't exercise for your physical health. Exercise for your mental health. I know no one listening right now wants to experience a mental illness. One of the best possible habits that you can get into leaving this presentation here today is to simply start to exercise aerobically for 15 minutes each day. It doesn't have to be too intense, like go for a slow run, go for a swim, ride your bike, play a bit of basketball, set up a mat and do like a workout routine in the evenings whilst watching TV, get a skipping rope and skip for 15 minutes every day. There's so many options, but just pick out a few that you enjoy doing. Start today. Doesn't have to be too intense. It's about doing it consistently rather than doing it intensely and then stopping. So something easy, do it consistently, 15 minutes. If you currently aren't exercising and you do this for the next 2 weeks, I'm very confident that you'll start to notice an increase in your energy and mood, because aerobic exercise is one of the most beneficial things that you can do for your mental health. So start to incorporate into your life leaving this presentation. All right, lifestyle habit number 3. Number 3 is to sleep for around 8 hours each night. Now, when it comes to sleep, it's generally recommended to get between 7 and 9 hours as an adult. For younger people, it is recommended up until the age of about 20, 21 to be getting around 8 hours of sleep every single night. Now, the reason sleep is so imperative and important for our mental health, and I'll keep the explanation for this very simple. The whole purpose of sleep is to rest and recover our mind. And if we're not resting and recovering our mind for long enough, it's going to get sick just like any other part of the body. Now, last year we did surveys on about 5,000 Queensland high school students. And we found the average amount of time that a Queensland high school student is sleeping is about 6 hours and 15 minutes. And this corresponds with a lot of the most recent research, which shows that a large proportion of the adult population is sleeping less than what is recommended. Now, when it comes to sleep, this is very important. It's not what you get on one night that matters. It's what you get over a period of time. Roughly, they estimate around 10 days. That determines how you feel. And so when I'm talking about aiming for 8 hours of sleep every single night, if you're getting 8 hours of sleep 4 or 5 nights a week, and then 1 or 2 nights a week, you get 5 or 6 hours of sleep. So say, for example, the night before a big exam, you stay up till 2 o'clock studying and you only get 5 or 6 hours of sleep. Or say, for example, this Saturday, you have an absolute raging party and you only get 4 or 5 hours of sleep. That's okay if you're still getting 8 hours of sleep 4 or 5 nights of the week. So when it comes to sleep, it's what you get consistently. It's not what happens on one night. So don't leave this presentation here today going, oh, if I didn't get 8 hours of sleep, I'm doomed. That's not the case. 8 hours is recommended what you should be aiming for, roughly. And if you're getting 8 hours 4 to 5 nights a week, and then occasionally you're not, that's okay. You just want to be consistently aiming for around 8 hours of sleep. Now, I understand that there will be people listening right now who struggle to get to 8 hours of sleep every night. You either struggle getting to sleep or you struggle staying asleep. I'm going to give you guys a couple of little sleep hygiene tips to help you hopefully build up to 8 hours sleep at least 4 or 5 nights a week. The first little piece of advice is you want to go to bed and wake up at roughly the same time each day. So it's very important for us as human beings to get our bodies in a circadian rhythm or a routine. So if you're one of those people and you wake up on the weekdays at around 7 o'clock, and then on the weekends you're waking up at midday, your body and your circadian rhythm is really out of routine. And it makes it very difficult for our brains to fall asleep because they're confused as to when we're waking up, when we're falling asleep, because it's constantly changing. So as much as you possibly can, try to go to bed and wake up within about an hour of the same time consistently throughout the week. Number two, and this piece of advice I think is going to apply to a lot of people. What most of us do before we go to sleep is we're on some kind of electronic device. So we're on a phone, we're on an iPad, we're on a computer, we're on a gaming console. Now, these devices, they emanate this thing called blue light. And when you're on these devices, when that blue light hits our eyes, our prehistoric brains, our hunter-gatherer brains, we interpret that blue light as sunlight. And because when we're hunter-gatherers, we didn't have electricity, when it was sunny, that was normally our cue to wake up. And when it was dark, that was our cue to go to sleep. So when you're on an electronic device right before you go to bed, it's telling our prehistoric brains, it's sunny, it's time to wake up. And as a result, it makes it very, very difficult to get to sleep. So if you're one of those people listening right now, and you really struggle to get to sleep, but you're on a phone right up until the moment you turn the lights off, that is normally one of the contributing reasons as to why. So what I would suggest and recommend moving forward is about 30 minutes before you go to bed, dim the lights in your room, turn off all electronic devices, and do an activity that doesn't involve a light. So for example, reading is a good one, doing some artwork, talking to a friend on the phone, obviously with a light off, just having a conversation, listening to music. But 30 minutes before you go to bed, do an activity that doesn't involve an electronic device. It'll help your brain to fall asleep a lot easier. Very simple, but just 30 minutes, start to do it. And as much as you can, start to dim the lights in your room and reduce the light around you as you head up to the time that you want to fall asleep. Number three, not many people know this one, but if you've got really bad sleep difficulties, the first thing you should do when you wake up in the morning is to walk outside in the sun. And the reason for this is it takes our brain a couple of minutes from the moment we are out in the sun to recognize that it's sunny. What then occurs is our brains recognize, okay, it's sunny, it's time to wake up. And as a result, it wakes up our process and our brain a lot earlier in the day, which means that later at night, we fall asleep a lot easier. If you're one of those people that you're not seeing the sun until midday or in the afternoon, you're really going to struggle to fall asleep early at night because your brain's waking up earlier in the day. So what I'd recommend is simply when you wake up in the morning, get a glass of water, have your breakfast or brush your teeth outside in the sun. It only takes about 2 to 3 minutes for our brains to recognize it's sunny and to wake up. And because our brains wake up earlier in the day, they fall asleep and get tired earlier at night. So it'll help you to fall asleep a lot easier. Number four, when it comes to caffeine, you really want to reduce the amount of caffeine you're having at least 6 hours before the time you plan on falling asleep. I think in society now, there is, I'm not an epidemic, but there is a huge use of caffeine in everyday life. And I think it has two impacts. Number one, it impedes people's ability to fall asleep if they're having caffeine coffee after midday. And number two, it also often masks how sleep deprived someone is. So if you're waking up in the morning and you're feeling incredibly tired, that's your body telling you, I'm tired, I need more sleep. But then if every single morning you automatically have a coffee, a really strong coffee to wake you up, now all of a sudden you're not as aware of how your body is feeling and its need for sleep because you're masking it with caffeine. So as much as you can, just try to reduce caffeine intake, particularly 6 hours before you fall asleep. And finally, when it comes to sleep, you really want to make sure that you're being consistent, that you're focusing on turning off devices, that you're making sure to go outside in the sun as early as possible in the day, that you're reducing caffeine, and if possible, if you can keep your room at a lower temperature, we as human beings find it a lot easier for us to fall asleep when it's a bit colder. So if you do have the ability to reduce the temperature in your room, that's also been found to help you when it comes to falling asleep. But aim for 8 hours, at least 4 to 5 nights a week, and make sure to prioritize your sleep. Often people are neglecting sleep for work, for study. It's not a good tactic long term. It isn't the best for your study, and it definitely isn't the best for your mental health. So 8 hours, thereabouts, at least 5 or so nights a week. Number four, the fourth lifestyle daily habit. And I'll be impressed if anyone knows this one. This one's quite interesting. is to get at least 30 minutes of sunlight every single day. So when we're hunter-gatherers, we used to spend a large portion of our day outside in the sun. And as a result, it was very, very important for our mental health because we spent so much time there, and it gave us this thing called vitamin D, which, by the way, vitamin D, it isn't a vitamin, it's a hormone that's really important to the effective regulation of chemicals within our brain. So we all need a certain amount of vitamin D each day in order to keep our brains operating effectively. Studies have shown that about 90%, we get about 90% of our vitamin D through sunlight. And they found that for the average person living in Queensland, in Australia, around 30 minutes of sunlight is enough to get you a sufficient amount of vitamin D to keep the brain chemically in balance. When it comes to sunlight, you might be thinking, well, like, how important can it be? I mean, you can think about your own life experiences. You know when it's been a rainy, overcast couple of days and you've been cooped up inside, generally you feel a decrease in energy and mood. And then say the sun comes out and you go to the beach, you normally feel a big increase in your mood. And the reason for this is because sunlight is imperative to our mental health. It's quite fascinating. In Europe, every single winter, rates of depression symptomology increase by around 20% every single winter, simply because of a lack of sunlight and a lack of vitamin D. And it's called seasonal affective disorder, acronym SAD. And it's basically where people become more sad in winter because they're not getting the daily intake of vitamin D because the sun isn't up as often. And so sunlight is very, very important for our mental health. It gives us that vitamin D. And what's recommended is that 30 minutes of sunlight each day. Now, I reckon the majority of people listening right now, you probably are getting 30 minutes of sunlight each day. If you're not, really simple piece of advice. Things you normally do inside, just do them outside in the sun. So if you're one of those people that you always study indoors, set up a desk outside your office, outside your house, and start to study outside in the sun. If you're one of those people you always take phone calls indoors, when you get a phone call, just go and talk and walk outside in the sun. If you're one of those people that always exercises and works out in the gym, occasionally start to exercise outside in the sun. And so doing these simple things you normally do inside, doing them outside in the sun, you'll find yourself getting that 30 minutes of sunlight quite easily. And the last thing I'll say before we have a little tiny break and move on to the last ones, the last thing I'll say when it comes to sunlight, and people often find this quite effective, is often people who are experiencing mental illness and they're feeling down and they're feeling sad and they're feeling stressed, what they'll do is they'll hide away in their rooms and they'll stay indoors. And that is the worst possible thing that you can do for your mental health. When you're feeling down and low and stressed, one of the best possible things that you can do is to walk outside in the sun. So like literally, next time you're crying, don't cry inside, cry outside in the sun. I'm not actually joking. Like literally, next time you're crying, I want you to picture my face and walk outside in the sun. Maybe that might make you cry a bit more. I don't know. But just get into the habit of using sunlight to your advantage. The way I view it, and this might sound a bit corny, but the way I view it is sunlight's kind of like this little thing you have in your back pocket. And when you're feeling a bit down or low, you take out a bit of sunshine, you sprinkle on yourself, and you feel a bit better. It's beautiful. But yeah, we've got a lot of sunlight in Australia. Use it to your advantage. Aim for at least 30 minutes each day. And when you're feeling down or low, try to get outside in the sun. And what we'll do right now, we're going to have a quick 30 seconds break. I just need to get a bit of a drink of water, and we'll come back in 30 seconds. So just bear with me if you want. Stand up, have a stretch, maybe do a quick run and dash outside to get into the sun for 20 seconds, and we'll come back in like 30 or so seconds. Alrighty, start getting back into it. So we've covered the first 4 daily habits that we suggest for mental health. We're going to be moving on to the fifth lifestyle daily habit. And the fifth daily habit to get into is to simply socialize frequently. We as human beings, we've evolved to be a very social species, because when we're hunter-gatherers, we're only small tribes of 200 to 300 people, and our survival depended on our ability to trust and interact and communicate with other people. And so we used to do all our activities with friends, with loved ones. Like, social interaction was an imperative part of our survival. And it's built into our DNA that we as human beings, we need to socially interact. We're a very social animal. So if you're listening to me right now and you're thinking like, oh, like James, like you don't understand. I hate people. You don't. Like, biologically, we've actually required and evolved to need people. Have a think about this. What's the highest form of punishment that we give criminals when they're being like a bit naughty in jail? It's solitary confinement. The thing that scares these big, tough criminals more than anything is to be socially isolated and prevented from spending time around other people. And the reason for this is we as human beings, we need social interaction. We need other people. In the longest study that they ever conducted on human happiness, it was done by Harvard University. And they followed 268 people from the ages of about 17, 18. They were undergraduate students, and they followed them throughout their entire life. And what they found was the biggest predictor of a human being's happiness was the number and the quality of their social relationships. The biggest predictor of how happy someone wasn't their success or their money, but the number and the quality of the social relationships in their life. And this was very consistent across the study. So we as human beings, we need social interaction. We get our happiness in life from social interaction, from human connection. Unfortunately, what's happening, I'm sure you know where this is going, is that we as humans, we're actually the least social we've ever been as a species, which means that we spend less time interacting one-on-one with other people than at any other point in human history. And it's having catastrophic results when it comes to mental illness. Now, the thing is, with the fifth lifestyle habit, I can't really tell you how much to socially interact each day. Like with the other ones, I've given you scientifically backed numbers about what's recommended for your mental health. So 15 minutes of aerobic exercise, 8 hours of sleep, 30 minutes of sunlight, stress breaks throughout the day. I can't really tell you how much to socially interact each day. I mean, first of all, it'd be a bit weird if I was like, talk to 8 girls for 7 minutes each day and 10 guys for 9 minutes. It'd be a bit weird and controlling. And also, every person listening to this right now is different. So some of you might be quite extroverted, which means you get your energy in life from people. Some people listening right now might be quite introverted, which means after you're around people for a while, you need time to be by yourself and to recuperate and to recover that energy. But the key point I want to make for every single person listening is that we all need people and we all need social interaction. And so the last thing I'd leave you with this fifth lifestyle habit, besides emphasizing the importance of social interaction, it's a little 2-word acronym. And you'll see it on that slide. The 2-word acronym is to prioritize people. And what I mean by that is whenever you have a choice between 2 activities, one that involves people and one that doesn't, always pick and prioritize the activity that involves people. So say for example, this weekend, your friends go, wait, let's go to the beach. Or you could stay home and watch TV. Choose to go to the beach with your friends. Say for example, this weekend, your mum asks you, okay, let's go shopping. And you could stay home and just like flick and scroll through your phone. Go shopping with your mum. Like, pick the activity that involves people. And this might only happen once or twice a week, but if you start to get into the routine of prioritizing people over technology and objects, that will have an incredibly beneficial impact on your mental health long term. I personally do this maybe once or twice a week. I will always prioritize and pick the option or the activity that involves people, because I understand that we as human beings, we get our happiness in life from people. We get it from social interaction. We don't get it from technologies and objects. So please remember, socialize frequently and prioritize people as much as you possibly can. The sixth lifestyle daily habit is when having negative thoughts, do an engaged activity. So there's this term in psychology, it's called rumination. And what it basically is when you have the same negative recurring thought for a period of around 20 minutes or longer. So things such as, I'm a failure, I'm a failure, I'm a failure, I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough, that kind of thing. Now, having listened to this presentation, just in your own head right now, Why do you think periods of consistent negative reoccurring thoughts would be so bad for a person's mental health? What process do you think it causes? It causes stress. Your thoughts can trigger that fight or flight response and can cause stress within your body. So if you're listening to me right now and you've had a really bad life event happen to you, and you think about that event again and again and again and again, the same biological response that occurred at the time of that event is occurring again within your bloodstream, and you're triggering that fight or flight response. That's why a large proportion of people with depression report that they ruminate every single day. So they have these periods of consistent negative recurring thoughts, is because your thoughts can cause your body stress. Now, before I teach you one of the most effective strategies that you can use whenever you start to have these negative thoughts, it's really important to realize one thing, and that's the following. You can't actually think yourself out of thinking about something. It's impossible. So say, for example, I say to myself, stop thinking about that fan, stop thinking about that fan, stop thinking about that fan. There's a fan above me right now. My brain is now thinking about that fan. Like, you know when you're trying to get to sleep at night and you tell yourself, okay, I need to get to sleep, get to sleep, get to sleep, get to sleep. And the more you think about getting to sleep, the harder it is to get to sleep. Someone with depression can't simply go, I don't like feeling this way. Stop being sad, stop being sad, stop being sad. It doesn't work like that because, and you're going to have to follow along here, in order to think yourself out of thinking about something, you got to think about the thing that you don't want to think about, which causes you to think about it. You know what I mean? So you can't actually think yourself out of thinking about something. You'll just get into this thought spiral and cause yourself rumination. So what you need to do instead is when you notice yourself having these negative recurring thoughts, you need to do an engaging activity to distract yourself from those negative thoughts. So like when we're ruminating, our entire focus is on our internal world. It's on our thoughts. What we need to do is shift our focus from the internal world to the external world. And the best way to do that is through an engaging activity that involves a lot of external stimuli. So for example, competitive sport is a very good one. If you're engaged in a competitive game of sport, it's very difficult to be focusing on your internal dialogue because you're focusing on where the ball is, other players' body language, where you're going to go. And as a result, it's an activity that involves a lot of external stimuli. Same thing as being in a band. Basically, anything that has a lot of things externally occurring is good at distracting you from your thoughts. But I'm just going to give you the most effective and probably the easiest engaging activity that you can do when you start to have negative thoughts. And it's the following. Whenever you notice these thoughts creeping in and you can't get rid of them, find someone and engage in a proper one-on-one conversation with them. And you can try this after you leave here today. The reason it's so effective is when you're engaged in a proper one-on-one conversation with someone, you're listening to what they're saying, you're thinking about what you're going to say next, you're judging their body language. And as a result, a one-on-one conversation with someone is a very engaging activity. Now, you don't need to like walk up to them and be like, you know, hey, I'm ruminating, let's talk. That'd be a bit weird. You don't need to do that. Simply just go up to someone and say, hey, like, what are you doing this weekend? What's your thoughts on Donald Trump? Like, just start a conversation with them about anything. And what they've found is that if you can distract yourself from your thoughts for 20 minutes or more, majority of the time you don't go back to the thoughts you were having prior to that distraction. So I want you to make this mental note right now. Whenever you notice yourself having negative thoughts, the worst thing to do is to sit by yourself thinking them over and over and over again, ruminating, causing your body prolonged stress, triggering that fight or flight response. The best thing to do is to distract yourself from those thoughts through an engaged activity. And one of the easiest and probably the one I recommend most is simply getting involved in a proper one-on-one conversation with someone. And for those of you wondering, okay, but James, what happens if I'm by myself at home? If you're just by yourself at home and you're having these thoughts, call up a friend. Talking on the phone is nearly, not as, but it's nearly as effective as in-person communication. And just start having a conversation with them about anything. And if there's no one that you feel comfortable calling and having a conversation with, there's a whole host of numbers that you can call. I would highly recommend Lifeline on 13 11 14. You can also call Beyond Blue, but these numbers you can call and you can simply just have a conversation with someone. They're open 24/7, but just make sure when you're having negative thoughts, do an engaging activity don't get caught in ruminating for hours and hours and hours. All right, number 7, and you guys might find this one a bit intriguing. Number 7, the 7th daily habit, is to incorporate a Mediterranean-style diet. So when we're hunter-gatherers, our omega-3 non-essential fatty acids and omega-6 non-essential fatty acids, they were in balance, is estimated by a ratio of 1:1. So they were very much in balance. Studies have now shown that for the majority of Westerners, our omega-3 to omega-6 ratio is really out of balance by a ratio of about 1:16. So it's incredibly out of balance. Studies have now shown that having an omega-3 and omega-6 ratio that's out of balance, meaning really high omega-6, low omega-3 in comparison, it causes inflammation within our body that leads to a whole host of illnesses and disease, including mental illness. More and more research is now coming out that showing inflammation increases the likelihood of experiencing a mental illness. So what's recommended is to adopt a Mediterranean-style diet, because the Mediterranean-style diet is very high in omega-3 and it's low in omega-6. So I'm going to break this down for you guys. Omega-3, the foods we get omega-3 from, and the foods that are high and recommended in the Mediterranean-style diet are the following: fish, all types of seafood, seeds, nuts, salads, and whole grains. So that's where we get the majority of our omega-3s from. And those foods are highly recommended and a crucial staple part of the Mediterranean-style diet. We get our omega-6 from, so the one that we want to reduce as much as possible, from refined and processed foods, from wheat, from corn syrup, and from sugar. So we get most of our omega-6 from those processed, refined, sugary foods we already associate as being unhealthy. Now, the reason I recommend a Mediterranean-style diet is because I could talk about this for an hour, but it's such a well-known diet that if you leave this presentation and start to do a bit of research, it's got very clear guidelines that are universally accepted that this is what a Mediterranean-style diet is. And by its very essence, it's a diet that's high in omega-3 and low in omega-6, which is incredibly beneficial for your mental health. And if you just wanted to incorporate a few elements of the Mediterranean-style diet into your life, I would recommend increasing the amount of seafood or fish that you have, increasing the amount of seeds or nuts that you have, increasing the amount of green salads that you get into your diet, and try to have whole grain breads rather than like plain white floury breads. So whole grain is much healthier and better for you. It's got much higher rates of omega-3 and it's a lot lower in omega-6. So those are some small little changes you can make. But when you leave here today, do a lot more research on the Mediterranean-style diet. There was 2 big studies that have come out in the last 5 years that have shown that adopting a Mediterranean-style diet significantly reduces the chances of experiencing mental illness going forward. And it is very beneficial for your cognition and for your mental health. And when you think about it logically, it does make sense. Like what we put into our bodies is obviously going to impact how we feel and our emotions. And putting in foods such as salads, seeds, nuts, fish, healthy fats, and decreasing the amount of processed, refined foods, sugars, wheats, corn syrups, reducing those, it is going to have an impact on how we feel. I've adopted a Mediterranean-style diet into my own life, and I feel a lot healthier. I feel a lot more clear. One thing I'll say on this, you might have heard about fish oil tablets and how it's an omega-3 supplement. You can increase your omega-3 through fish oil tablets and also through algae tablets as well. I would, however, recommend as much as possible to try to get your omega-3 naturally. It's a lot easier, and I recommend as a better option to get your omega-3 from your diet as much as possible. Yes, you can go down the supplemental route, but I do recommend getting it from your diet. It's just normally a healthier way to go about it. But yeah, please do a bit more research on Mediterranean diet when you leave here, and consider adopting a diet that is high in omega-3 and is low in omega-6, reducing that processed, refined, sugary foods. All right, we're up to the final one today, the final lifestyle daily habit. And if you're listening right now, I've been talking for quite a while. You might be getting sick of my voice. You might be getting tired. But please listen up to this final 5-minute section on the last lifestyle habit, because it could save your life. It could save a family member's life. It could save a friend's life. And the last lifestyle habit is to seek help early. Now, guys, it would be ridiculous if I had cancer and I refused to go and seek treatment for cancer because I was embarrassed and ashamed of what other people thought. It would be absurd if I broke my arm and I refused to go and see a doctor because I was scared that people would think that I'm weak, or I'm inferior, or I'm different, or I'm weird. Well, mental illness, it's just like any other illness. And just like you would with any other illness, the earlier you seek help, the more likely you are to recover and to start feeling better. And the sad thing is when it comes to mental illness, the current statistic is only about 33% of people who are currently experiencing mental illness actually seek help. Imagine if only 33% of people who had cancer actually sought help. Do you think rates of cancer would be increasing or decreasing? They'd be increasing just like they are with mental illness. And the reason for this is, unfortunately, there still is a bit of a stigma attached to mental illness within society. And people often think that if you've got a mental illness, it means that you're weak, or you're inferior, or you're different, or you're weird. And nothing could be further from the truth. My dad was by far the toughest person I've ever met. Incredibly talented, successful, popular, intelligent people experience mental illness every single year. And so the key thing to remember is, just like you would with any other illness, the earlier you seek help, the more likely you are to recover and to start feeling better. And when it comes to this last daily habit of making sure to seek help early, this is all I really want you to remember. This is the global recommendation among psychologists, psychiatrists. This is kind of the global standard. If you've been feeling down or low or a lack of enjoyment in activities every single day for a period of around 2 weeks, that's when it's recommended that you seek help. And when I say seek help, I don't mean straight away going to see a psychologist or a psychiatrist. When I say seek help, I mean simply just going up to someone and saying, hey, you know what? I haven't been feeling the best for the last 2 weeks. That's it. And the reason that's so important is often people with a mental illness, they wear a mask and they hide it from the rest of the world. And as a result, it can be a very lonely place. And what happens is when you simply just go up to someone and you say, hey, you know what? I haven't been feeling the best for the last couple of weeks. You're now dropping that mask. And on top of that, you've now got someone who can help you to start feeling better. And guys, once you take that first step, and that is always the first step of simply just going up to someone and telling them how you're feeling, dropping that mask and telling someone you're not feeling that best. Once you take that first step, the good news is that in Australian society, there is actually so many places that you can go to seek help. I'll list a couple for you guys right now. You can go to Beyond Blue's website at beyondblue.org.au. You can call Beyond Blue's number. It's a brilliant charity with a whole host of resources that covers basically all mental illnesses, and is a great starting point. You can go to Black Dog Institute, another great charity with a lot of resources, fact sheets, and advice when it comes to mental illness. You can call Lifeline on 13 11 14, probably the best number to call in the event of a crisis. It's a 24/7 line and a number that you can call. Highly recommend. You can go to a Headspace Center. This one's super important. If you're listening right now and you're aged between the ages of 12 and 25, you can walk into a Headspace Center completely off the street. You can go to headspace.org.au to find the closest Headspace Center to you. There's normally a Headspace Center within about 15 to 20 minutes of every place in Southeast Queensland, and they're dotted all throughout Australia. And you can walk into a Headspace Center and say, look, I haven't been feeling the best. I'd like to talk to someone. Generally, within a couple of hours, you'll be talking to a trained psychologist, counselor, or psychiatrist, and it's completely free. You can just walk in off the street. Normally within a couple of hours, you'll be talking to someone, or at the bare minimum, have an appointment in the future to be talking to someone. And if you're 12 to 25, it's a completely free service, and I would highly recommend Headspace as an option. You can talk to a friend, a family member, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a sports coach. I mean, there are so many options available to you, but you just need to have the courage to seek that help. And I'm so passionate about this one because doing this job over the last 7 years, I know so many young people and so many people in general that are no longer here with us today because they probably didn't seek help early enough. So if you're listening right now through the screen and you haven't been feeling the best, you've been feeling down or low or sad every single day for the last 2 or so weeks, and next couple of days, don't keep it to yourself. Find someone that you trust and tell them how you're feeling. If at any point between now and the end of the year, you have a period where you're feeling down and low and you're not getting enjoyment from things, don't wear the mask. Find someone you trust and tell them how you're feeling. Guys, if at any point throughout the rest of your life, you've been feeling down or low, just like you would with any other illness, drop the mask. It's the bravest thing that you can do, and tell someone, I'm not feeling the best. And then after that, there's so many places that you can go to seek help, including the ones that I just listed before. But guys, please remember, a really important habit to get into is when you're feeling down or low, seek help early, tell someone how you're feeling. So over the last 40 or so minutes, we've covered 8 daily lifestyle habits that you can incorporate into your life. And I'm going to quickly run through them right now and do a bit of like a test, I guess, with you, and to test how much you remember. Number 1 is to give yourself stress breaks throughout the day. So long periods of stress is what we want to avoid. And you can do that by just breaking up your stress levels with stress relieving activities interspersed throughout your day. Try not to be stressed for long periods of time. Number 2 is to aerobically exercise for how much each day? If you thought to yourself 15 minutes, you are correct. You want to exercise aerobically for at least 15 minutes each day. By the way, start this afternoon. Pick out something, start this afternoon, get into the habit of doing it. Number 3 is to sleep for roughly how much each night? 8 hours. You want to be aiming for 8 hours of sleep at least 4 or 5 nights a week. Remember, it's not what you get on one night that impacts your mental health. It's what you get over a consistent period of time. So you want to be aiming for roughly around that 8-hour mark. Number 4 is to get at least 30 minutes of sunlight every single day. Once again, things you normally do inside, just start doing them outside in the sun. Make a few changes to your lifestyle, your environment. You'll get your 30 minutes of sunlight quite easily. Number 5 is to socialize frequently and to remember to prioritize people over objects and technology. We get our happiness in life from people. We get it from human connection. Just try to do as much socializing as you possibly can. Number 6, when you're having negative thoughts, don't sit with them. You want to do an engaging activity to distract you from those thoughts. And one of the best engaging activities that you can do is a proper one-on-one conversation with someone. Number 7 is to adopt a Mediterranean-style diet that's high in omega-3 and a low in omega-6. Now, you don't have to completely follow the Mediterranean-style diet. It's just a diet that innately has high omega-3 and low omega-6. And it's a very universally well-known diet, so you can do more research on it when you leave. But if you simply start to incorporate more omega-3 rich foods into your diet and lower the amount of processed, refined, sugary, syrupy foods in your diet, that's an amazing thing that you can do for your mental health leaving here today. And number 8, very important, when you're feeling down or low for a period of time, don't keep it to yourself. Tell someone how you're feeling. Seek help early. Guys, these are the 8 daily habits that I discuss about how to look after your mental health. Now, you might be looking at the screen right now and you might be thinking, okay, like I do 2 or 3 of these 8. You might do 1 of these 8. You might do none of these 8. What I'd like each of you to do right now is just to look at the screen and to pick out just one of these 8 daily habits that you're going to make a conscious effort to work on following this presentation. And my advice while you're looking at the screen, pick out the one that you think needs the most work in your life. So if you're one of those people that currently does no exercise, maybe starting this afternoon, you're going to start to exercise. If you're one of those people that might get 6 hours of sleep a night, consciously decide to try to go to bed 5 or 10 minutes earlier every single night and build up to 8 hours. If you're one of those people that spends most of your days indoors on a computer and you don't socially interact or get enough sunlight, maybe start to pick sunlight or social interaction. Whatever it is, just pick out one of these 8 daily habits that you're going to make a conscious decision to work on moving forward. And the reason why I'd like each of you to do that is because these 8 daily habits, they've been found to improve your mental health and happiness for those with and without a mental illness. And if you look at the slide, you'll see that the word without is in orange. And the reason I've highlighted it is because this program, it's aimed at everyone. And you might be listening right now and you might be thinking, like James, I don't need to listen to this. I don't need to apply this to my life. I don't have a mental illness. The entire reason I started the charity Breaking Free, the entire reason this program exists within schools and throughout Australia is so that we can provide and teach people how to live a mentally healthy lifestyle now in order to reduce your chances of getting a mental illness going forward. It is so much easier to prevent someone from getting a mental illness, a neurochemical imbalance in the brain, than it is for someone to get a neurochemical imbalance in the brain and over a period of time have to get their brain back chemically in balance. It is so much easier to prevent than it is to treat. So these 8 daily habits are for every single person that's listening. Whether you're currently experiencing mental illness or you don't have a mental illness, it's for every single person. Because at Breaking Free, we strongly believe that when it comes to mental illness, prevention is the best cure. And that leads me into the final 2 to 3 minutes of this presentation here today. And I believe the most important 2 to 3 minutes of the presentation. So far, we've talked about 8 daily habits. I think you'd all agree they're pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Hopefully you've all just picked out one that you're going to work on leaving this presentation here today. But the final thing that I'm going to be talking about is when it comes to your life choices. So you've got your daily habits, the things you do every day, and then you've got your life choices, the major decisions. And my last little piece of advice is when you're making major decisions, major life choices, put your mental health first. And what I mean by that is whenever you're making a major decision in your life, base your decision and your choice on what's going to be best for your mental health and what's going to make you happiest and most fulfilled as a person. And I'll get a bit personal and deep here. I saw this firsthand with my dad. You could have everything in the world to live for, but if you don't have your mental health, you've got nothing. Every single person that's listening right now, you've got one mind, and you're going to have it with you in every single moment and every single experience of your entire life. So it has to be your number one priority. When you're picking friends, relationships, subjects, degree, career, when you're making these important life choices, you have to base your choice and your decision on what's going to be best for your mental health and what's going to make you happiest and fulfilled as a person. And I made this shift in the way I made life choices after my dad passed away. I went, you know what? There's no point being wealthy or successful or popular if you're not happy. There's absolutely no point. And so I decided then and there that I was going to base every major decision in my life on, is this good for my mental health? And does this make me happy and fulfilled as a person? And if you leave here this presentation here today and you close down your computer and you were to start making life choices based on, is this good for my mental health and does this make me happy? Rather than, is this going to make me wealthy? Is this going to make me successful? Is this going to give me short-term satisfaction with drugs, etc.? But if you start to make choices based on, is this going to make me happy? And is this good for my mind and for my mental health? That will have the biggest impact of anything that I've talked about here today. And so over the course of this hour, we've kind of discussed 2 things. We've discussed 8 daily habits that you can incorporate into your life to look after your mental health. And what I would suggest, because I wasn't able to do this in person because of the COVID situation that currently exists, what I would suggest is writing down those 8 things, either on a whiteboard, on your diary, on a piece of paper, and sticking it somewhere that you can see every single day as a reminder of what's recommended that you do. And then the second thing we talked about is, along with your daily habits, when you're making life choices, prioritize your mental health and put your mental health first. And if you do those 2 things, you start living a lifestyle with positive daily habits, and you start making choices based on what's best for your mental health and happiness. If you do those 2 things together, you're giving yourself the best chance of living the most mentally healthy and happy life that you possibly can. Now, normally I would give out resources at the end of the presentation when I'm in person, but obviously I can't do that at the moment. So it's up to you to write notes down and to put this information somewhere that you can see every single day. But one thing that you all can do leaving this presentation right now, or even at this very moment, would be to follow us, the charity that I run, Breaking Free Charity, on Instagram. And we put up a lot of strategies, advice. We're going to start doing informative videos, do friendly reminders, and we also showcase the work that we do within schools, within the Queensland community. So if you would like, I would highly recommend following us on Breaking Free Charity. And if you did have any questions or queries about this program today, if you were to DM the Breaking Free Charity Instagram page, I will actually respond to it personally. So if you do have any questions or queries, I can respond to them via Instagram. So feel free to message us at Breaking Free Charity. You can also go to our Facebook. If you still use Facebook, you can go and search in Breaking Free Charity, and we're on Facebook as well, so you can put a like there. But yeah, the main thing I would recommend is following us on Instagram. If you want, you can share it. And yeah, you can get in contact with me via the Breaking Free Charity Instagram page. So please give it a follow right now. And yeah, feel free to share it. Thank you guys for listening. It's been an hour-long conversation, not really a conversation, me kind of just talking. I got to admit, it's a bit weird not presenting in front of an audience, a live audience. But I hope that through your computer screen, you found this presentation interesting and useful, and you can apply some of the concepts and the strategies in it into your own life to live the most mentally healthy and happy life you can. And I just want to finish by saying, well, my dad would have said 100% if he was still with us here today. And that's please, please, please look after your mental health, because it's by far the most important thing you all have. Thanks, guys. And I think we've got a bit of time for questions after. So if you have any questions, I'm going to stay on the stream to answer any questions that you might have.
Amazing. Thank you so much, James. We haven't had any questions come through so far. So just a couple of definite thank yous for a great presentation. No, I think you've probably answered all their questions.
All right, awesome. And yeah, and if anyone has any questions, they can always just, DM the Instagram page afterwards, and I can respond to them there as well.
Amazing. Oh no, here we go. Michelle would like to know if you're taking volunteers in for Breaking Free.
At the moment, like we can have volunteers come along to help hand out resources and take photos, etc. We're not open for volunteers in this essence of presenting, because with COVID and everything at the moment, everything's so uncertain, and the process of training up a presenter is quite comprehensive. It's a long 4 or 5 month process. And just because of how uncertain things are, like for example, I had 4 presentations booked this week and 3 of them got cancelled except this one because of the COVID situation. So at the moment, we're not taking volunteers for presenters, but we are open for volunteers to come to the presentations with the presenter to help hand out resources, take photos, and that kind of thing. So we are open for volunteers in that sense, but not for the presentations themselves.
Awesome. Another quick question here. What can I do if I know someone is struggling every night? I can hear her pacing, but she won't talk to me about her struggles.
Okay, that's a really good question. So the best thing that you can do if you've got a family member or a friend who's experiencing mental illness and you feel completely helpless and you don't know what to do, which is a very common feeling, the best thing you can do with someone who's experiencing mental illness is shared activities. So what often happens is when someone's struggling in life, people say stuff like, I'm there for you, I'm here for you if you need me, feel free to reach out, I'm always here to talk. Someone who's experiencing severe depression or anxiety, they don't feel like reaching out. They don't feel like talking. And so the best thing that you can do, instead of saying, I'm here for you, is to actually show that you're there for them by doing activities together. So a couple of good examples, you guys have learned these 8 daily habits. Instead of telling your friend, oh, you should start exercising, tomorrow say, hey, do you want to go for a quick walk? Let's go for a quick 15-minute walk. Or tomorrow, let's go down to the basketball courts, or whatever kind of exercise that she enjoys doing. Say, hey, let's go and do it. And do the activity with the person who's experiencing the mental illness. You don't have to tell them to do it, just do it with them. Say, for example, when it comes to sunlight, say, hey, like, do you want to go get morning tea today and sit outside in the sun? But the best way you can help someone who's experiencing a mental illness, telling them that you're there for them is really beneficial, but actually showing that you're there for them by doing activities and getting involved and doing things together really makes them feel included. And if you're clever about it, you can get them doing activities that are beneficial for their mental health, such as the exercise, going outside in the sun, having those stress breaks. So yeah, my best piece of advice is do things together. And then when you're doing those activities together, that's a really good opportunity to talk about how they're feeling while you're doing something together, rather than kind of coming to them when they're in their room, they're feeling down or low, and just asking them directly. It can make them often a bit uncomfortable. So get involved in an engaging activity. And once you're doing something, going for a walk, etc., that's when you can kind of bring up and ask those questions. And when it comes to asking questions, this is important as well. When you're asking someone how they're feeling, the best way to simply do it is I was just wondering like how you genuinely feeling when it comes to your mental health. And then when they respond, the best thing that you can do is just to listen with empathy. So instead of judging what they say, just listen and be empathetic towards it. Because often what people do is someone might be saying, I'm feeling really low because of I've had this happen, I've had this happen, I've had this happen. And often someone will go, well, you know what? I've had way worse things happen in my life. Like you can do this, you can do this. Like I've gone through way worse. And they're judging what that person's saying rather than just listening with empathy. So when you ask someone how they're feeling, just listen to their response. Because often someone with mental illness, they just want to talk about how they're feeling. They don't want you judging what they're saying. So yeah, like the two things kind of summarized: engaging activities, do stuff with them. Don't just say that you're there for them. And when you do have those conversations, just listen with empathy. Don't judge what they have to say.
Awesome advice. I think that might be it if we don't have any other questions come through. But yeah, on behalf of everyone, just want to say thank you so much for the presentation today.
No problem.
I know I've definitely taken a few things away. I'm sure everyone else has as well. And we had a few people that had to leave sort of slightly earlier for class, and they've wanted to pass on their thanks as well. So
All good.
Amazing. Perfect. Well, we'll wrap it up here. In addition to all the resources that James mentioned, Griffith's also got dedicated counselling services. So there's a 24-hour hotline for students. There's staff counselling as well, and yeah, free student counselling as well, in addition to those great resources in the community. So plenty of help out there for anyone that needs it, and yeah, make sure you reach out. And thank you so much. We'll leave it there.
Thank you. See you, everyone.
Thanks.